right, welcome everyone to our Brodown episode of Brothers and Boss Battles Video Game Showdown Survival Horror Games. I'm Anthony, and this is a podcast where my twin brothers, Pete and Tom, and I discuss video games new and old. As we do on this podcast, which you hopefully know by now, we pick a genre or category of video games, pick 3 video games within that genre or category, and take the first 3 episodes of that grouping, reviewing and critiquing those games. Once those 3 games are reviewed and critiqued, we spent the 4th episode of that grouping on our Brodown episode, because we're brothers, where we have the 3 games go up against each other based on a list of criteria and declare a winner. As I mentioned, we are discussing survival horror games today, and those 3 games that will be going into the Brodown today are The Evil Within, The Callisto Protocol, and Resident Evil 2 Remake. All right, guys, this was we recounted these games as we reviewed them the last 3 episodes. This is a axiomatic sort of genre within video games, survival horror, and there's some great titles in there. I think we got at least a couple in this one, but don't want to give anything away too early in the game.
Couple for sure, yeah. Some really good ones though, like a couple of top tier games in this category, which is cool.
Yeah, and as we've done in past Brodown episodes, we'll tick off the categories and discuss each game within that category, and unofficially assign points, not really, but we'll kind of keep a mental tally and see which one comes out on top after quote unquote winning as many of these categories as possible. So since we're talking about survival horror, we just got done with Halloween here in the States. Why don't we start this Brodown off with discussing the fear factor of these 3 survival horror games? Anyone want to go start the comparisons?
I guess I can give initial thoughts on this category. So I think they all did very well in this category. Yeah, they all created like a very like suspenseful and eerie ambiance. A lot of the enemies too were scary. It's hard for me to really give a nod to one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
this one.
So you're saying like a 3-way tie almost.
Yeah,
For
I
me-
think so.
I'll jump in.
Yeah, you seem to disagree, so go ahead.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, I do disagree, but not to say that I find that opinion ridiculous. But for me, The Evil Within probably takes the cake here. It was just on another level of eerie to me, and they did that basically through everything, through just the atmosphere and the environment and having to kind of crouch and sneak around. But then also there's a lot of the characters, the enemy designs and the bosses, well, I'm sure we'll get into those later. Really, really well done. And I just thought they were a notch ahead of the other games.
One of the things I didn't like about Evil Within, and I don't know that this is necessarily subtracting from the fear factor, but just the fact that it was so like random, where you would be in one location, then there would be some flash, and you would be in some completely different location. That kind of took me out of the experience.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, and we had touched upon that in the episode as, the fact that this was sort of happening in someone's mind and wasn't happening in a real setting. It wasn't the police station or even something far flung like a moon of a planet. Did that sort of give them an easy out as to making it, scary and sort of all over the place, kind of giving you as the player, making you feel sort of unsettled because of that. But, were they able to sort of take the easy way out? But because they didn't have to be grounded. But
yeah, you have no limitations really when you can do anything. I guess
Yeah.
that's the definition.
But I, at the end of the day, for this category, I do agree with Pete. I mean, I think Evil Within just was really the creepiest with just, you basically start the game getting knocked out by this shadowy creature, and then in the next scene you're hanging upside down in a meat locker with a guy working on body parts on the table 10 feet away. Then all the sneaking around, that really creates a lot of suspense, because it's like the game's sort of implying that you really shouldn't be going in guns blazing, and that if you get caught, you're in trouble. And that's something that the other two games don't really have. I mean, Resident Evil 2 remake, you're not really ever sneaking around, and I love that game, so I'm not necessarily criticizing it for that, but that's sort of a big part of the suspense and fear factor for me, is that sneaking around. You don't do it in that game. Callisto Protocol, there are points in the game where you are doing that, and they sort of lead you to do that as the more prudent choice rather than taking down enemies. But I felt that you can sort of blow those enemies away a little bit.
That's true. I do think the difficulty of Evil Within made it actually contributed to the fear factor.
Yeah,
you had to be more careful and more cognizant of how you were using your ammo or not using your ammo.
But contrary to that point, I think I made this point in the Evil Within episode, but it was almost too hard, where like you knew you were going to die 100 times or 200 times. So it almost like I almost didn't care that something was around the corner and I was going to die, because it was just so challenging. But and I just just to reiterate, I'm glad you mentioned kind of that opening scene that you're playing, where you're in like that meat locker and then you have to sneak and get the key. Like, I don't think I was afraid in any scene of any of these three games more than I was in that scene.
Yeah. Especially because you're just starting out the game too. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely, a big part of the fear factor. I'd have to give it to the Evil Within. I mean, what else do you guys think as far as what contributed to the fear factors of any of these three games? What else was...
I think in Callisto Protocol, the setting, because it's almost like, one of these old like classic horror movies. But when you're like in this isolated area with not many people at all around, it was a moon, right? The Callisto Protocol took place on like
it's a moon
of a planet. Yeah.
Callisto is
something like that. Yeah.
I believe of Jupiter. I looked it up for the episode, so go back and check out the episode. Rather than just take it 2 seconds to look it up on Google. But if you want to know exactly what planet Callisto is the moon of.
Yeah.
This might be my... Sorry, go ahead, Tom. Finish.
No, I was just saying, so like that setting too. And just like Resident Evil, maybe a little less, because, while there's not many people around there, you're still like on Earth, like, next to adjoining cities that don't have this issue. So like, like it's, you feel like you're able to escape more easily.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with as far as fear factor is concerned, and we talked about it in the episode and how they may have overused it and it got a little annoying, but having Mr. X chase you around throughout Resident Evil 2 remake in both the A and B scenarios of Claire and Leon, I think that added to the fear factor, and as well. Where's he going to pop up? And he's obviously really powerful. And there were a lot of creepy things like that. And honestly, what is even more creepy is just hearing his footsteps off in the distance and like getting louder and coming towards you. Like, that's really where they build suspense and fear, as opposed to, just encountering him.
Yeah, his encounters definitely got annoying, but before it got annoying, it definitely added to anxiety that I was feeling throughout the game. But I wanted to just piggyback on something that Tom said. Maybe this is my personal bias, but actually the setting of Callisto Protocol and just having it kind of being more futuristic and unrealistic made it less scary to me. when you're playing in like Resident Evil, it almost feels like that could happen, like a zombie apocalypse or something. Whereas Callisto Protocol it was extra far fetched because of the futuristic feel it had.
Yeah.
I guess. I mean, it wasn't really.
You really don't. It's not like you're in. I mean, you're in sort of a spacesuit in part of it, but it's sort of like the beginning. You're in a jail. I mean, that could be a jail on Earth. I mean, it's it doesn't have to be a jail on a planetary moon.
Yeah, I guess just with the suit and how you have the gravity glove and how your energy is on the back of your suit. Your
HUD.
It makes it all futuristic feeling.
Yeah. So Tom, you're sticking with the three-way tie?
No, I mean, I think they're close, but yeah, I think you convinced me that Evil Within should be number one. And then I would give Callisto Protocol the slight nod for number two, with Resident Evil 2 rounding it out.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that order as well.
Okay, for me, it's clearly Evil Within. The other two is kind of a toss-up, but I'd probably put Resident Evil second and then Callisto last.
There's more to talk about with that, but I think we'll cover that in, sort of the music and sound and camera angles and characters and all those categories. So why don't we move on then to another category? Sort of one of the main features of a survival horror game is the upgrade system and inventory management. And I think we could talk about those two together for these three games and how that played into the experience and how it worked in each of these games and which one should come out on top on that. Any takers?
Yeah. So starting with say the upgrade system, Resident Evil 2 had the least sophisticated upgrade system, right? You would basically find some enhancements to your weapons, and that's how you would upgrade.
Right, but it probably had the most traditional inventory management system of survival horror games of these three.
Yeah, that's true. Certainly,
it did. Well, especially with the magic boxes and when to save. I mean, it was a little less cumbersome than past Resident Evils because you didn't necessarily, they had some auto save points, in this that weren't in earlier games, and there was no ink ribbons either, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and I'm not necessarily bashing Resident Evil for having the least sophisticated upgrade system. That's just what it is. But in terms of inventory management, for sure, in Resident Evil, that was the only game of the three where I really felt that was an issue, like an additional challenge that I had to negotiate.
Right, because of, you might be solving a puzzle where you need multiple slots open, but then you're down some ammo or down some health items. So that, yeah, I mean, I definitely, Resident Evil played that up big as, being sort of in the forefront of this category, as I'm sure most listeners know. The Evil Within, the where they lacked an inventory management, and they had it sort of coupled with the upgrade system, because the upgrade system, you were able to upgrade personal aspects of yourself, like how fast you would run, how fast or how long you could run before losing breath, and what your guns, what your health, what your guns can do. But it also had how much ammo or you can hold, or how many matches you can hold, because as we discussed in the episode, you could burn some enemies as opposed to having to shoot them until they're dead. So that all played into sort of a co-upgrade system and inventory management, because you'd want to maximize the ammo or the other features that would that would coincide with your gameplay.
Yeah, I really like the upgrade system in Evil Within. I think that's a clear winner for me, because you're able to upgrade your like physical traits as well as just like how strong your guns are, and so I think that was a cool, almost like RPG like element to the game.
Yeah, and it wasn't just how strong your guns are; it's also like what critical hit chance.
Yeah,
Like
or
the capacity of the
accuracy.
magazine.
Yeah.
and that was done through the finding of green gel, which was sometimes dropped by enemies, sometimes just found in jars throughout the various levels. So that was different. I couldn't help but think that you have your green gel in that game and you have your green herbs in Resident Evil, but you know they made it a little bit different. And again, you weren't
very different.
They serve
completely different things.
Purposes.
Yeah,
you're not allowed to have a green thing in two different games.
No, I know, but it's true.
And Callisto Protocol, I mean, right? That upgrade system was basically through credits, right? Which was the monetary.
Yeah.
Callisto credits.
Callisto credits, yeah.
Yeah, and you would find them on downed enemies, or after you could stomp them. That was sort of a gameplay mechanic. You could stomp on them, and they would give out credits sometimes, and then you'd be able to smash boxes and stuff, and you'd be able to do that.
Yeah, so essentially, same kind of system as Evil Within.
Yeah, it's the same.
And then you use those credits on powering up your weapons.
Right, and
but it was only weapons in Callisto Protocol.
Yeah,
you couldn't upgrade your health.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah, I mean those weapons included different things, including your melee weapon, your guns, or your GRP grip gauntlet thing that would allow you to essentially have telekinesis.
Yeah, and just the way they did it was really cool with like sort of like a 3D printer type of
right. Yeah, we touched upon that on the show, on the episode for Callisto Protocol. But graphically, what they did in Evil Within was kind of contributed to just the creepiness of it, where you kind of go into this chair in this safe room area, and it almost looks like an electric execution chair where they put this thing on your head and your arms get strapped down, and then it sort of jolts you, and then you have this upgrade. So that was, another cool graphical representation of the upgrade systems, like in Callisto Protocol, which had that sort of 3D printer on your guns, adding new parts and stuff like that. So that was cool. So, definitely graphically, those two games with the systems, I think, were superior to Resident Evil 2 Remake. If you want to go traditional, I think Resident Evil 2 Remake has the most, traditional inventory management system, which, is a pretty big part of a survival horror game. You think that? What do you guys think as far as like, does that give the category to them or to Resident Evil? I mean,
in terms of inventory management, I think Resident Evil was by far the best. I mean, like it added an extra. Well, because the thing is, like your key items, items that you needed to use to progress the story were included in your inventory, which wasn't the case in the other games.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's another gameplay element there, and just like Callisto Protocol, for example, was just so. Towards the beginning of the game, it was really annoying to manage your inventory. I found myself constantly having to drop items, and if
it wasn't really important.
It was too easy, and there was a surplus of items, but it was just annoying to have to keep doing that. And there was no.
But if we're combining the two,
there was no. Well, okay, sure.
We don't have to. We could vote on them separately.
Yeah, combining the two, I'd say Evil Within is number one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense to combine them because, at least for Evil Within, they're kind of related.
Yeah. I will say this with Evil Within, and you touched on it, but you didn't have as much by way of the inventory management, but the fact that you had to select what to upgrade, whether you update a strength of your gun or do you upgrade how many, upgrade your match holding ability by 2 matches, and that might be more useful, and that's sort of like the inventory management version that the Evil Within decided to have. So no, it's not exactly like Resident Evil 2, or maybe a traditional survival horror game, but it was there in its own right.
Yeah, I love that whole system with Evil Within, and it really made you strategize. And your decision you made early in the first part of the game was going to impact, what you could do 15 hours later.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, I would pick Evil Within first. I'd go with Resident Evil 2 Remake second, and Callisto Protocol. While it had the cool graphical representation of your upgrades, it sort of lacked with regard to the inventory management everywhere else.
I'm going to put Callisto Protocol second, and then Resident Evil last. The inventory management did become quite annoying at times, where you didn't have a key item, and then you had to go all the way back to a box, and then you ran into Mr. X, and that was just
that's sort of the point of.
Yeah, no, I know, and it's a challenge, and it needed more of a challenge, that game. So I understand that, and I'm kind of quibbling a little just to make a decision. And just another thing on this topic I didn't like is just that sometimes when you upgraded your weapons, it took up an additional spot or two of your inventory, which is also kind of like, a catch-22. I don't know. So I put Resident Evil 2 last.
Huh?
I agree with your assessment, actually. Evil Within would be first, then Resident Evil 2, and then Callisto Protocol. Again, I don't think there's any clear loser. I'm not saying Callisto Protocol is so bad in this regard, but I think the order is clear enough. Just in my opinion, obviously.
I thought you might have been stating someone else's opinion, so thank you for clearing that up.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that people weren't saying that I wasn't conveying that it was fact.
No. As people might believe on a podcast.
Nothing we say on this podcast is factual.
Did we even play these games? We did. That part is factual. All right. Another staple of survival horror games we'll talk about next. The puzzles. And, I think this one's going to kind of be easy to discuss because Callisto Protocol literally has 0 puzzles.
That's not true. You had to move around the electrical
fuses.
Yeah.
I thought maybe there was one more or something with a generator. I don't know if I'm confusing the games, but there was
every survival horror
generator.
Every survival horror game has to have a generator. That's true.
I think that puzzle was basically just moving 2 fuses.
So it's twice as hard.
And these are those puzzles are so unmemorable. I don't remember even moving fuses in the Callisto Protocol. That's weird, huh?
Yeah, you had to do that. You
grab them with the grip, right? And then, no, you don't even have to do that.
No, you just pick them up and then just to open up more doors.
Slot and put it in another slot.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, other than that, the Callisto Protocol's extent of a puzzle is, every once in a while you would get 2 corridors to go down instead of 1, and 1 would just lead to some items. So you'd have to go back to the other one anyway. So it's just a matter of whether you got those extra items that you probably didn't have enough room in your inventory to carry anyway. So without even discussing the other 2 yet, I think Callisto Protocol's got to come last here.
Yeah, I agree.
Agreed.
And then, in the episodes we talked about some of these puzzles. Resident Evil is, it's a staple of these, especially the earlier Resident Evil games, which the remake tried to emulate, with puzzles. So, you have a lot of sort of iconic type puzzles in Resident Evil 2 Remake. They took out some from the original Resident Evil 2, but they were all there in spirit, or mostly in spirit, where you have to get medallions and figure out how to place the scrolling buttons on each statue to get the medallion to come out, and then put that in the lion statue, or the maiden statue, whatever it was, in the front of the police station.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I like how they did things. Oh, sorry. I was just say I like how they did things too, like with like how they would tell you the combination to a safe, for example, like in a file or
On a developed piece of film.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was
Like
cool.
I mean,
It's like a puzzle to get the puzzle to get, yeah.
yeah. So I thought that was cool too.
And
yeah, I was just gonna say that I had never played the original Resident Evil 2, so I kind of remember as a kid watching you guys play. I know a little bit about it, but I have to say I was pretty impressed with the puzzles. The volume, the number of puzzles there were, and just like the difficulty were spot on. Like, because it's obviously you're doing a lot of other things too, so it's not a puzzle game.
yeah,
They weren't too hard, but they also weren't, or so many of them weren't too like super duper easy either.
yeah, there's that one with all the chess pieces, and you have to use those in a couple of portions to open various doors, and they kind of give you a vague hint as to what order they're supposed to be in. So, that's another sort of big puzzle there. And like you said, I like that point you made about them being the right difficulty for this type of game, because that leads us to the Evil Within, which did have some puzzles, but they were almost just thrown in there, I feel, because it was a survival horror game and they felt they had to. The one that I cited in the episode was, where you have a two-sided plate and it's like, okay, what side do I got to put on? And one's all bloodied and you see the guy that had been the victim of it. And, you just know to do it the other way because of that, so that is a puzzle. And there's a few others, but they're all, I mean, that's actually the easiest one, but they're all sort of in that vein, I feel.
You're cherry picking the easiest one.
Yeah.
I remember the one in I guess it was a mansion where you have to get, what do you get? 2 like tablets or something?
Yeah.
Based
from the pictures.
Exactly. And the number is based on like the number of people in the paintings. I thought that was difficult.
Yeah, that was a clever one.
Yeah.
I mean, I also think just the fact that, and I was going to maybe mention this in gameplay, but I actually think it kind of could go here. The fact that in Resident Evil 2 Remake and in a lot of Resident Evil games, you're kind of going back and forth. It's like, okay, I got to this door and it's locked, but I know it needs the club key. And then so I have to go here and then, let me look at the map and okay, I got the club key. Let me go back there. And it's like, oh, there's an item I can't pick up. I got to go somewhere else. That's another staple of survival horror. And in a way, it's like a puzzle. It's like, where do you go when and with what items? And, Resident Evil does that, fantastically. I mean, that's, kind of perfect.
Yeah, because the game, yeah, I guess you're kind of like backtracking a lot in that game.
Yeah.
But you're doing a lot in the same area, whereas these other games were more linear in that sense, where you would just make your way through a chapter and then you would be in the next chapter and you can't go back.
Exactly. Yeah. That's so. I think for puzzles, for me, he's got to go to Resident Evil 2 Remake as the winner of this category, with Evil Within probably at a fairly distant second, and then Callisto Protocol after that.
I think we all agree on the clear divisions of those 3. Yeah.
That's our opinions.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right, for this week's Would You Rather question as part of our mid-episode filler, we are answering the question we asked last week during our Resident Evil 2 Remake discussion. And we pointed out in that game, and as everyone knows, the Raccoon City Police Department is such a iconic setting for a large portion of that game. So we asked the viewers and each other, what setting would you like to be the focal point of a future Resident Evil game? And we gave 3 options, 1 being mall, 2 being a school, and 3 being an amusement park. So we'll give our opinions on this in a second, but just wanted to reveal the winner of the poll was in fact the mall. So we may have some Dead Rising fans here, that particular setting, but they would like to see a new Resident Evil game set in a mall, and that would be pretty cool. Using items from the stores maybe to your advantage and stuff like that, sort of like in Dead Rising. So thank you for all those that participated on our social media. And I'd like to throw it down to my brothers now to see what they thought of this question and what they would pick for a new Resident Evil setting.
I'll start. So I decided to go with school. Now, particularly, I am thinking that it would be cool if it was like a college campus or something like that, where it was, because your run-of-the-mill like elementary school, at least here in the United States, is a lot of it looks very similar. All the classrooms basically have the same structure and that kind of thing. So I wasn't really thinking of that, but I do think that a college campus could be a very cool setting, because you would have like multiple different buildings that comprise the campus, and then an outdoor area, and then even you can get more involved with different subjects. So I'm thinking there would probably be a science lab or something that would fit right into the Resident Evil playbook there. So that's what I'm going with.
Maybe the school created the zombie virus in their chemistry class.
I don't think that would be a good plot.
Some disgruntled professor or something. Yeah, but you make a good point, Tom, with the campus, because the reason why I didn't go with the school was because, like you said, it kind of, at least in maybe more of a elementary or even high school, it all kind of looks the same. But if you did it at the college campus, and you could even go into the dorms or student centers, even parking garage or something,
athletic fields maybe, stuff.
That works. But I actually went with amusement park, because there I think there's some different things you could do with the different rides indoors and outdoors, and I don't know, it just seemed the creepiest to me. It reminds me of that R.L. Stine, the Goosebumps book. What was it, One Day at Horrorland, I think. So I don't know, I thought that would be the creepiest.
Yeah, I actually went with amusement park as well. School, I again was sort of like you, Pete, thinking more along the lines of elementary or middle or high school or something, where it was going to kind of be, maybe get boring after a while. And I didn't pick mall, which again was the top vote getter for our poll. But I didn't pick mall because it made me think of Dead Rising, and I actually wasn't a particularly big fan of that game. So, sort of by default, but because I also think it would be cool, I picked amusement park. And I think, you have a funhouse setting or different rides and the carnival games and, all that type of stuff. I think it would be, interesting. I think you can associate things that are maybe supposed to be fun but can be scary, like clowns with amusement parks. So, you got that built in right there too. So, we all diverged from the listeners with our picks, but, that's all cool. All right. Check us out on Instagram and X at Bros Boss Battles. Check out our website at brothersandbossbattles.com. We are on YouTube. And now back to the regular show. All right, welcome back. We just talked about puzzles, and let's get into the controls and camera of these games. Anyone want to start?
One thing I had pointed out in the Resident Evil episode is that you run with by pushing in the left stick, which I didn't like. I'm pretty sure in the other two games you hold one of like the trigger or shoulder buttons to run, which to me felt better. Yeah, it's a minor point, but that's something that first came to mind.
Yeah, I didn't really mind that as far as, how to operate the running in any of these three games.
Something I noticed right away playing Resident Evil, because I had played that last of the three, and it felt awkward to me. But again, not a major thing.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise, the controls are kind of similar in these, where you're, sort of holding, there's a trigger button, and for shooting your gun, and
a big part of the controls in these types of games, I think, is switching between your weapons.
Yeah.
Would you guys?
Yeah. So the big thing, so switching weapons is big in these types of games, and obviously, the Evil Within and Resident Evil 2 remake kind of did what the normal good thing is, I think, which like allowed you to select weapons or items for the 4 slots on the D-pad so that you can just easily switch between them.
Oh yeah, Callisto Protocol had a big problem in this area.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about it in the episode.
Yeah, we have to beat a dead.
I don't want to just repeat, but it just, you had to kind of go into the menu, and then there was only, you could have a short gun or a long gun, and you couldn't really, if you had 2 long guns, you had to kind of go into the menu, not just switch on the fly during battle to change it, essentially. I mean, so, yeah. I mean,
that was really cumbersome.
Yeah. And, so that's part of the controls. I mean, Pete talked about a little bit about the running in Resident Evil. The cameras, I would give another mark against the Callisto Protocol here, because they sort of had a quick attack. If you mostly were using melee, especially early on in the game. And then a lot of the enemies would then mutate as shown by these tentacles that would come out of a certain body part, either their mouths or their torsos. And then you were able to do like a quick shot to kill one of those or to shoot it, and that would kill them instantly. But it would automatically lock on to the head regardless of where these tentacles are coming out of. So it was almost like, it was kind of like burdensome to have to move the camera down in order to get the reticle. I don't know.
Yeah.
To like the right body part in order to shoot it. So it's like you added in this cool feature of this kind of quick shot after a melee beatdown, but then you just made it more difficult. So, that was part of the controls in Callisto Protocol that I didn't like.
Yeah, the aim assist was too aggressive there, where it was like trying to push it up. You're aiming, it's trying to push the aiming up towards the enemy's head when really you just wanted to shoot him in the stomach.
Yeah. So, and I don't really have too many points of comparison for Resident Evil 2 and the Evil Within. I mean, Pete had the running. Tom, do you have anything regarding those two?
No, running is never really a problem. I think in Evil Within, you were able to map like the syringes to your D-pad too, which is cool.
Yeah.
In case you wanted like a quick switch to heal yourself.
Yeah, that you were able to, and that was cool.
Yeah, on that point, you guys remember? I feel like in Evil Within, when you were in that sort of inventory screen, time would slow down drastically, but it wouldn't necessarily just stop.
Yeah,
that's right. Yes. Right, and it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I like that too.
In the other two games, I don't think that was the case.
Well, Resident Evil, it stops completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can like go, that is the same for going into the map.
Yeah, right. Which is great.
Yeah, we talked about the mapping system. That, I don't know. Does that fit here?
No. So on the controls and the cameras,
the cameras we didn't really talk about specifically though. But so I do think that problem I just mentioned or the problem I found with that Callisto Protocol with the aim assist was just as much a camera problem as it was a control problem.
Yeah, I agree. A little bit of both. I don't know. I'm not really thinking of any problems or great things as it relates to the cameras and camera angles of these three games. I thought they were all good, all fine.
Yeah, I think this day and age, the cameras aren't as big of a problem anymore. They all control the same way with your, analog sticks.
I will say this, and this just might be because I'm old, but I almost liked the way the camera would work in those old Resident Evil games where like you go down a corridor and it has to switch the angle completely, and then like those fixed camera angles, I guess is what you would call it, as opposed to now you just you move your head as if you're controlling yourself, like walking down a room or a corridor or something, and you can look all around and all of that. So it's obviously smooth and great programming, great graphics, and all of that. But those other ways sort of made those survival horror games cool. But I don't want to like knock the new one for not having fixed camera angles.
And that's a boomer opinion.
Not that old.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe for nostalgic sake, but I don't know how anybody could prefer that. So anyway, I don't know. I guess we're going to wrap up this category.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Callisto Protocol's third. The other two are like 1A and 1B for me.
Yeah, I guess I think I would give the slight edge to Evil Within just because the flexibility on mapping, it's different variety of items to the D-pad slots. Other than that, they felt pretty similar. And then I would go Resident Evil in the second spot.
Yeah, to me, Callisto was definitely last, just because of switching on the fly, switching your weapons on the fly. And then Resident Evil 2 will be second, just because of the running thing for me was a non-negligible problem. And then I'll put Evil Within first.
You shouldn't play any first-person shooters then.
Okay, I won't.
Oh, no.
Or will we?
Oh. So.
No, we won't.
Maybe we will. Let's talk about the music and sound, which, contributes a lot to many games, but is, pretty important in survival horror games too, especially the sound. I'll go with first on this. I want to point out that, and I did this in the episode, but I love the Debussy's Claire de Lune playing as in the save rooms in the Evil Within. And as Tom had mentioned in the episode, how it almost sounds like it's coming through an old phonograph or something, and it just really, it's so weird because that music signifies a save area. It's like the one sort of like few safe spaces in that game, and it's still so creepy. With the inclusion of that song and the way it sounds. So I really love that. It's a great classical piece, but it's also really great in this game. But all three were good as far as the howls or growls in the distance, and we mentioned Mr. X's stomping throughout the police station in Resident Evil 2. And there were just some really creepy things in the Callisto Protocol, just like just to signify the emptiness of everything, and just how lonely you were. You'd hear a drop of water into a puddle from a pipe, and it just would echo throughout, and just that was really cool use of sound recording for these games, I thought.
Yeah, I agree. The Resident Evil also had some good music too. Like when Mr. X is chasing you, and like when he gets in range, the music changes to like this really kind of suspenseful kind of tones and whatnot. And the save rooms had some nice kind of like semi-soothing sounds, but also a little creepy too. So that was cool. I also, as a part of this, I think we should talk about the voice acting in each game.
Sure.
And this might blend more towards the dialogue, but Resident Evil seemed overly corny to me.
It's just become so much part of the stick, though.
Yeah, I know, but
I'm not saying, you could not like it. I'm just saying that's like I think they've given up on trying to get like good dialogue in those games.
Yeah, and I feel that just the lines that they're saying reflects poorly on the voice acting, even if they're not necessarily doing a bad job.
Mhm.
On the other hand, I thought Callisto Protocol had probably the best voice acting out of the three games.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
definitely did, in my opinion, as
Yeah,
well. I mean,
I think
Evil Within was also pretty corny a lot of times. I felt
Yeah,
not to the extent of Resident Evil, but
Yeah, I mean,
still not good.
it was significant. Maybe not. Maybe significantly is not the right word, but it was a bit older, where I felt than the other two games, which I feel is, it, especially in gaming, it was less important for that in the past. But whatever. Excuses aside, Callisto Protocol used a number of actors. I mean, they're all actors, but like like actual actors that I think have done things in sort of big name, either shows or other games and stuff.
Yeah.
And we went through,
it showed.
yeah, and yeah, I think it showed as far as the voice acting is concerned. Um, so I don't know, anything else to add?
No, I have nothing to add.
Yeah, because what I'll say is this. I mean, it's kind of weird, but if we do music, sound, and voice acting, I think Callisto Protocol's got to win the voice acting category. For me, music, just because of the inclusion of Claire de Lune, it's such a powerful part of that game for me. Like I think of that song when I think of that game. The music has to go to The Evil Within for me, and then sound can really go to any of them. As far as hearing the monsters or zombies or monsters or whatever in the distance, just other ambient sounds that are putting you in this surreal sort of survival horror world.
Yeah, I also want to mention just the sound of like the screech in Evil Within. Like it was also, I thought, powerful and left a lasting impression on me.
What screech?
I don't know. You hear like these screeches throughout the game. I don't know if that's supposed to be like Laura or.
Yeah. No, you're right. And even like the opening of doors. There's like the one where you're on like the title select screen, and then you ultimately pick, new game or continue or whatever it is, and it like rushes you down that corridor, the camera angle, and then it's like, with the door opening and stuff. So, I think that's cool.
That's what the door opening sounds like.
It's been a while since I've made a sound on this podcast, so I wanted to add another one. But anyway,
so this is tough.
Yeah, this one's tough, and just to say, Callisto Protocol is going to have to start ramping up its efforts here in order to compete for the final vote in this Brodown. But I think they definitely do here. I personally have to give this amalgamation of a category to Evil Within. I would give Callisto Protocol probably put it in the second spot, and then Resident Evil 2 is the final spot in the music, sound, voice acting category.
I have the same order. I'm not sure. I think I might have Evil Within as the top in every category we've done so far. But anyway, I agree with your ranking.
Except for puzzles.
Oh, true.
Yeah, see, like I really wanted to give it to Callisto Protocol, but I feel like they had zero music throughout the whole game. So it's kind of hard to give it to them. So I think I'm going to make it unanimous.
Sorry, Callisto Protocol, but you did come in second on that one, so kudos. All right, let's talk about gameplay. That's one of the most important factors of any game. So let's get into that, and we could break that down or include within an overarching category of gameplay. The guns you use, the other weapons you use, the bosses you battle.
Yay!
So why don't we get discussing on that? Because at the end of the day, that's sort of like the linchpin of a video game is the gameplay.
So I guess we kick it off talking about basically your means of combat. I don't want to say exclusively guns because Callisto Protocol, you punch half the game.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you swing that baton. It's not really a punch.
Well, yeah.
And you dodge and dodge some more. and then dodge
Dodge,
even
yeah.
more,
Yeah.
which got really tiresome real fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you dodged
Yeah.
with the left stick, right? And then you swung your melee weapon with the R2 button. I played on PlayStation, so the R2.
I think
right,
it was.
Tom? Or
Was
it
it the
R1?
right stick to dodge?
I'm not remembering what stick it
It
was,
was one
but
of
it
those
was
sticks.
like, yeah, you'd move it left, then you'd move it right, you move it left, and you didn't have to time it at all, as we mentioned in the episode.
Well,
So it was pretty
if you
lame.
if you held it and they swung at you from the other side, I don't think you would dodge that.
No, you had just had to alternate.
Yeah, you had alternate. I mean, there's a little action there.
But there was
I mean,
no
I
time.
give them credit
Yeah.
for trying something different because
Yeah,
but
I
That's something to be
just-
said.
it was
I-
different. But I don't know. I feel like if you're gonna make it was just different for the sake of being different, not that it was actually more fun than anything else.
it wasn't.
But
So that leads more into combat.
yeah, go ahead.
Did
go
you
ahead,
want to say
go ahead.
something more about the dodging?
No, I wanted to say we were bashing Callisto Protocol about the dodging and it wasn't fun, but they did have
Yeah.
that gravity glove, which I thought was
Oh, yeah,
a
that-
cool addition, something
Yeah.
unique.
That was cool, and it worked well with the environments because you could throw enemies into spikes or spinning blades and things like that. So that was a very fun combat element, gameplay
Yeah,
element.
throw them over the edge of a
Yeah, exactly.
platform.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it became
that-
essential in some areas.
Yeah, it was, but then you couldn't use it against certain enemies, which kind of was a bummer.
Yeah, the bigger enemies.
Like I
Yeah.
feel like if they could have like maybe added something more to it instead of just like lifting,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Like-
that's true.
something that you can use against enemies that you can't lift, basically.
Right.
Like maybe
That-
picking up environmental objects and throwing it at them.
Well, that you could do.
You
but-
could do that, but that never wound up really damaging anyone
Yeah.
too
Yeah.
much. But you could do that if there was a pick-upable item in that area you were fighting someone.
Yeah, I'm thinking more along the lines of like, I don't
Like
know, shoot a fireball out or something.
I was thinking fireball too. That's so
Wow,
weird.
that's weird.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
Like the fireball I have in our logo.
Yeah, but
Exactly like that.
Yeah. So,
All right, so for combat for the other two games,
Yeah, I liked.
well, gameplay.
like-
I mean, we're talking about combat first, but yeah.
Yeah. But just sticking on the combat, I think Evil Within was cool with the crossbow. It added a lot of variety to the.
The agony crossbow.
Oh, excuse me. The agony crossbow. Yeah, I think it added a lot of variety to the combat.
Yeah,
And also
otherwise-
just, I mean, you could stealth kill in that game. You couldn't really do that in Resident Evil.
Right. And they had a melee option in Evil Within, but it was more to just really get enemies off of you. It wasn't like a main gameplay element like Callisto Protocol or really able to take down any enemies. But it did have the stealth option was fun. And you needed to collect items to do that, right?
to
Stealth
do
kill?
the stealth,
Yeah. Or was
what
it you,
item would you need to have collected?
a knife or no?
I think you're thinking of Resident Evil.
Well, Resident Evil, so you
No, you're thinking of Last of Us.
Oh,
You need the
yeah,
shiv.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Resident Evil, you couldn't stealth kill, but they did give you they gave you items, which was new from the old games, where if you were grabbed, you could, if you had a knife, stab them. If you had a flash grenade, you could stuff it in their mouth and then, it would go off. If you had a regular grenade, you could do that. So it was sort of like you could use the flash grenade, let's say, to toss it at an enemy, or you could just use it sort of defensively like that if you were grabbed. So that was a cool gameplay element that Resident Evil 2 Remake had that was different from these other games and sort of an upgrade from its past games.
Yeah, definitely it was cool. I mean, it didn't make it a little easier.
Yeah.
Which
I mean-
the game didn't necessarily need.
But otherwise, Resident Evil 2 and the Evil Within, you're sort of using your standard firearm. Your pistol, your shotgun, your sniper rifle. I think you get a
Or
magnum.
spark gun.
Magnum. Well, the spark gun isn't in Evil Within, but
Right.
that's sort of a unique weapon to Resident Evil that wasn't as cool as the Agony crossbow.
Yeah.
Because the Agony crossbow, you could craft different arrows for it. That some are explosive, some freeze the enemy, and so forth. So that was all really cool.
And then
The crossbow was really great.
Yeah.
And then the other cool sort of combat element that the Evil Within had, and we touched on it before, was the burning the enemies. So in both that and Resident Evil, the bad guys were a bit of just bullet sponges. I think even more so in Resident Evil. So it was just another cool strategic combat gameplay point in the Evil Within, where like you get him on the ground, instead of waiting for him to get back up or shooting him while he's on the ground, you can light him on fire if you had the matches with you, and that would kill them for good. So that was a really unique element, I think.
Yeah, and even using like the crossbow, the flash bolt, then you can like stealth kill.
Yeah, it made
any
flash
enemies affected by that. So yeah, like it just added so much variety, like I said before.
It made like the flash stuff cool, whereas in like Resident Evil, I never used it. I mean, other than defensively in this game, but like I don't know, it was never like a popular grenade for me to use in the past. I feel when I played old Resident Evil games, and the Evil Within made it cool that you could stun enemies and then stealth kill them.
Yeah, not just cool, but it was very handy.
Yeah, because of
very useful.
Sort of lack of ammo. We talked about gameplay as like ammo in this, and in the episodes, the Evil Within always made you feel like you were going to run out of ammo. I know we talked about Resident Evil 2 Remake. You guys in the episode mentioned that you had no problems with the ammo in that, but I mentioned that on the B scenario, I played as Leon, and for the last 2 bosses, I had to kill with a knife swipe, because I had no bullets left on either one of those battles. So, I was very fortunate to have gotten them down to a level where 1 or 2 knife swipes killed them, especially that huge guy that breaks apart the train that you're escaping from. But, those 2 games sort of, at least for me, ammo was scarce, and that led to the fear factor, and it led to the inventory management, and led to the gameplay. Whereas in Callisto Protocol, it was just like an overabundance of ammo.
Yeah, I do agree with you that the B scenario was definitely more along the lines of having scarce ammo. I mean, I didn't run into that issue that you did with running out of ammo, but I mean, the A scenario was just too many items. Like I never felt like I was in danger of running out. That goes for like health items and those defensive items too, not just ammo.
Another factor of gameplay, we can talk about boss battles, and we can then meld that into the characters and story discussion, which would sort of be a separate category. But there are some unique gameplay elements when you're fighting bosses in these games. For example, in the Evil Within, when you're fighting Laura, you kind of have to defeat her with fire, whether that be with the torches you may find, or in the fire traps that are in the, conveniently in the areas where you're fighting Laura. It's, that's
she hangs out by fire a lot for someone who hates it.
Yeah. And then, Resident Evil, I feel sort of like the main kind of decision making regarding an enemy is like with Mr. X, like, do you shoot him? Do you shoot to stun him? Do you just try to run away? That's, once they get to their boss forms where you have to fight them, whether it be William Birkin or Mr. X, it's kind of just like, you got to unload on them. And with the Callisto Protocol, a lot of dodging.
There really wasn't a boss until like very late in the game.
Yeah, but then you fight the same boss 4 times.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that 2-headed guy.
I don't know, like so thinking back to the Evil Within episode, and obviously playing the game, like there are some bosses that you fight multiple times, maybe 2 or 3 times, right? It just didn't feel like, oh, this one again. In Callisto Protocol, it was just ridiculous. It was like you're doing the exact same thing in a slightly different setting.
Yeah, it was literally the same looking enemy. I don't think it was supposed to be the same enemy, but it could have been. story wise, and you kill them the same way. I mean,
Yeah,
the
it almost
last
felt like
the last boss I felt was all right, but
Yeah, the last boss was good.
yeah, the very last boss,
Yeah,
like
the very-
after you,
The second,
you
like
have
the
to,
final
like-
form.
yeah, you have to like the first time you fight him, it's the dodging all the punches and then hitting.
Yeah,
him.
7 times in a row. Like,
Yeah. But then the first phase of that last boss fight, you have to dodge again before he transforms into his final form.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so dumb. But just getting back to like the 2-headed boss guy, like it's like they almost turned that enemy into not a boss by including him so many times. Like it just began to feel like a normal enemy after the 4th time.
Yeah, and it's not like he was particularly hard to kill. It
like they kind of cheapened his appearance by just making him reappear so many times.
They did have like other basic enemies come out during some of those fights with that 2-headed monster, so that was somewhat unique, but still didn't. What was cool in the Callisto Protocol, and we mentioned it with the controls, was the glove, because there was that one. It wasn't like a one-on-one boss battle, but it was when you're on that moving shuttle and all of the sort of regular, maybe slightly more highly powered regular enemies start coming, and that's you got to decide whether to throw them over with your glove, or if you run out of batteries, then how are you going to dodge, how are you going to melee, and all of that. So that wasn't bad, but
that was cool. It was kind of like a gauntlet.
Yeah.
There's also a couple of gauntlets in Evil Within.
Yeah, the Evil Within just had so many different elements, so that was so cool. I mean, you had your gauntlet, areas, you had your stealth areas, you had your areas where you had a stealth, but you weren't killing anyone. It's like just like you literally had to hide from Ruvik, and so that was cool. And then you had your standard, just sort of shooting and dodging and shooting and all of that. So. No, I thought
the bosses were really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, Sadist, if you call him, kind of the earlier boss.
Mm-hmm.
It was a cool fight because you had like the whole like that village area to fight him in.
But depending on how many
fights on him.
Yeah, exactly. You couldn't really. You didn't have enough firepower at that point. Like you had the villagers had booby trapped the house essentially, and you had to kind of lure them into it. So there was just so many different elements in
I feel like the bosses too were more varied in Evil Within. Mm-hmm. I mean, like we mentioned, you fight Laura a couple times, but there was just more. Like that big monster in the parking garage was a cool fight, and we had to fight the 2 giants in the other part. Like
right.
Whereas in Resident Evil, it's like, okay, you're fighting Birkin, then you're fighting mutated Birkin, and then you're fighting like more mutated Birkin.
I mean, I don't know. Those are all cool, and it went with the story. But I mean, for me, I again have to give the nod to Evil Within.
So this isn't just for boss battles, right? This is for
gameplay in general.
Gameplay,
yeah. I think we covered a bunch of items of gameplay that, unless there's something else.
One thing I did want to call out was just like the level design, which is kind of related to gameplay. And we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. Whereas like Resident Evil, you're in this, mostly, at least for the beginning of the game, in this police station where you can go anywhere, but you'll be locked out of certain areas, obviously, and then you have to go back once you have the right items and stuff. And just also how they linked everything together. I felt it was really cool. Like how the sewers would, you could access the police station from the sewers, like through that little like elevator. I just thought it was cool how they tied everything together again.
Yeah, I mean that kind of does go to the gameplay element as far as the almost like the Metroidvania aspect of Resident Evil, where you are going back to different areas that you couldn't unlock and to get different items, and then getting a key and then you can unlock it.
So it's like it's less linear, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, I agree. I mean that's a pretty big aspect of these types of games, and for me, it's sort of the one knock against Evil Within, though they were trying to make a different game still within this genre. So, I don't think that was an intention. And I will say, you do go back to the asylum several times in the Evil Within, where it's the save room for most of it, but it does develop the story. There is some collectibles there. There are even some times where there is actual gameplay in those areas where, and I think in one of them, it sort of breaks apart and Ruvik is chasing you and you got to run away. So it's like, there was sort of that returning to that area, but yeah, it wasn't as, Metroidvania-y as Resident Evil.
I think Callisto Protocol is just
the most
level design was terrible.
Yeah, it's just and we talked about that with the when you're in the prison in that beginning section and you're trying to escape and you just go under corridor after corridor after corridor where it's just the same thing, not an enemy.
Yeah.
And I had mentioned that maybe that's because they were trying to make it realistic and this is how big a futuristic prison would be. But it just was really draining early on.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this in the Callisto Protocol episode, but I had like absolutely no grasp of the map, but I was always going in the right direction. I didn't like that at all.
You always were because it was linear.
Yeah, exactly.
It might as well have been a side scroller.
Yeah. But I agree with your point that the Resident Evil map, the way it's all connected and everything, I think that really adds a lot to the game.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard for me. I mean, again, Callisto Protocol for me is definitely last in this, but you make a good point about the map because before that discussion, I was giving this pretty handedly to the Evil Within. I might have to cop out and just give it a tie between those two with Callisto Protocol third.
Yeah, it's tough to say. Gameplay, I mean, I feel like, yeah, it is really tough because I feel like I had the most fun with Resident Evil, but also I complained a lot about it on the episode that I just felt the game was too easy. And Evil Within had a lot of good fun there, like we discussed with the weapons and everything. I think I'm gonna give the slight nod to Resident Evil 2 and then put Evil Within second. And then Callisto Protocol obviously last.
Yeah, so I'm thinking back to our puzzle discussion, and that really added to the gameplay of Resident Evil. That they had a lot of puzzles and that they were pretty good in terms of difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think Evil Within had just a lot more variety in the weapons you used and the bosses you were fighting. So I'd give it to Evil Within, then Resident Evil second, and then surprise, Callisto Protocol last.
Sorry, Callisto. All right, we're almost done with the categories here. We could pick a winner soon, but let's talk about the story and characters of these three games, at least how they compare to each other. What do you guys think?
I could jump in. So one thing that stands out to me regarding story is that I didn't like the fact that in Evil Within, it was very hard to grasp the story along the way, and then even at the end, and that you kind of were forced to play or at least watch or read about the DLC, specifically the two related to Julie Kidman, in order to really understand the full extent of the story. So I don't know. I in general don't like that when you have to play a DLC to get the entire story. So that was a strike against that for me.
Yeah. I mean, so the way I look at the story, before we get into the characters, the way I look at the story for these three games is this. I agree with you as far as the Evil Within. I think that had the best story, the most unique story, but it was almost impossible to get it fully from just playing the game. I had, played the game a bunch of years ago and afterwards looked up discussion on the internet about the story, and I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. I like what they did. this is essentially taking place in this sort of psychopath's brain, but he was, because of the system that was created, was, got them a bunch of different people involved and sort of trapped by this system. Whereas when you go to the story of Resident Evil and Callisto Protocol, I mean, there's sort of cliche kind of stories for horror things. Resident Evil, giant corporation creates a virus that gets out and poisons townspeople, and then they turn into zombies. And, while it took place in space, presumably in the future, the Callisto Protocol is essentially that. I mean, it was a little bit more nefarious in the sense that it was sort of purposeful to try to create this, I guess, superhuman that would be able to withstand the pressures of space and having to populate other planets. Like, I think that was the warden's sort of goal in this, and I guess the company that the warden was doing all of these actions for. Right? I mean, that was sort of that, but yeah. I kind of feel that sort of tropey, but it's also, at the end of the day, it sort of was the same thing. In The Evil Within, it was, a big corporation that had created this system that, was in over their heads or a little bit too greedy or whatever it was, and kind of got everything. And,
there wasn't like this bio, weapon virus type thing to.
But again, Resident Evil is trying to be the most real. Like, this could happen in the world now. Whereas, the Callisto Protocol is happening, no one's inhabiting a moon on Jupiter, and at least anytime soon, not in our lifetime. And then, this other thing was this, stems, The Evil Within was this system that basically combined a whole bunch of brains together and had it controlled by this, one solitary guy. Great for video games, great for stories. I like it all. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying it's, Resident Evil tried to be real, and that's why maybe it was a little bit more stale and less interesting.
Bland, yeah. Yeah, if I was just to rate the stories, I'd probably go, I think Resident Evil 2 would be last. It just really, nothing about it was compelling. I didn't necessarily want to advance the game to advance the story. Like, I didn't really care that much about it. Callisto Protocol would be second, and Evil Within would be first. So I kind of agree with what your assessment was, but it's kind of like talking about Evil Within. It's kind of like, the philosophical question of if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, doesn't make a sound. It's almost like if the story's really good, but no one understands it, is it even a story?
Yeah. It's tough because it's now knowing the story after, discussing the DLCs and reviewing the DLCs and looking up at the internet, I kind of know the story, but I get the point of just, you play the game in a vacuum. How was the story? And it's lacking there.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I feel like it's almost frustrating playing a game like The Evil Within
100%.
Because of the story. It's like you're playing and then, you get towards the end of the chapter and you're randomly transported to some area and just like, what the heck is going on? I didn't like that feeling, personally.
Yeah. I didn't like the feeling of not knowing what was going on and feeling dumb.
Yeah, but just even...
Yeah,
you take a step and all of a sudden you're somewhere else, and just
that was maybe supposed to.
There's no explanation.
Well, I think that was supposed to maybe have you think that you're, maybe you're in the brain. By the end of the game, you step on Ruvik's brain, so you kind of can maybe piece everything together to some extent. Not everything. You could piece some items together by the end. I think.
Yeah, you can. You're not. Yeah,
but yeah.
You will know more about the story after playing the game than before you started playing the game. That's fair to say, I think.
But yeah, so we don't have to give a ranking of the story specifically because we should talk about the characters as well.
Yes.
So in one half of Resident Evil 2 and all of the Evil Within, your main protagonist is a police officer / detective. Police officer in Resident Evil, a rookie police officer. That adds kind of a unique little element, and a seasoned veteran of a detective in The Evil Within, who's had a very rough go of his personal life, which in and of itself is sort of a cliche, but it's I like that character. Leon and Claire are just I grew up with them as characters, so it's like I have a soft spot for them in Resident Evil.
Yeah, but there's no real backstory to them, like that's of any kind of substance, right?
Not really at this
Like
point.
Leon,
In future Resident Evil games, there is, but yeah, at this point, they were just kind of like two nobodies who were getting themselves into this predicament.
Yeah.
lucky.
Well, for different reasons. I mean, Claire was looking for her brother. They weren't like seeking trouble, but
Yeah.
they're both sort of, Leon's sort of that like heroic, guy wants to do right. And, and Sebastian, on the other hand, is sort of, like I mentioned, just sort of depressed. There's more to his backstory that I think will probably get fleshed out in the Evil Within 2, which none of us have played, but we'd like to play, and maybe we'll cover it on a future episode.
I think Sebastian was much more of a interesting character because they gave you glimpses into his past and kind of what made him who he was, in the game, like the guy that you're playing as. Whereas, Resident Evil, Claire and Leon could have been anyone.
Yeah,
exactly. That was kind of like what I was getting at.
Yeah, and also like you get to play a little bit as Ada and Sherry in Resident Evil 2.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't find either of them particularly interesting either. I mean, Ada, I guess, is, but she was just such an unlikable character because of
yeah, she's so vague and
just
clearly
her personality,
keeping a secret. And that brings us to Jacob in the Callisto Protocol is the main protagonist there. And the Callisto Protocol did good because you're essentially seemingly wrongly imprisoned, and that's what sort of sets you on this track. You're just sort of like a regular guy making deliveries, and then you get captured on this planet and then put into the Black Iron prison on the Callisto, and then that sets you on your adventure to escape essentially, and then just towards the end sort of expose everything that's going on. So that was cool because you're not a soldier or a police officer or something like that. But at the end of the day, you seem to know your weapons as well as any of those types of people do. So that's a little but but I will say this, it is, but that also explains why you're using melee weapons for a good portion of the game too, because anyone could swing a baton more so. I mean, than shoot all of these powerful guns. So, that was cool, and it added a little bit more of an element of like, I did really feel with his story, like you really did want to find out what was going to go on, because it's like you think he is falsely imprisoned this whole game, and we had a bit of a debate on whether that was true or not. Like, I mean, like I said, I thought it was kind of, well, at the end of the day, I think he is falsely imprisoned. And then it sort of got more into that bigger philosophical question of whether he had done something wrong, whether he quote unquote deserved to be there. But it's pretty clear he's falsely imprisoned by the warden, who's just looking for test subjects.
Yeah. And you triggered something else about this story earlier on. I'm forgetting the character's name, but he's kind of Elias, yeah, and guiding you, and he really, I really didn't trust him, and just that aspect of the story was interesting, and you kind of wanted to see really what was going on with him.
Yeah, and then there's Danny with an eye, and another big character, supporting character in the game, who hates Jacob at first, but then they're forced to work together. And you learn her backstory and why she hates Jacob, and what her plans are. It's sort of as a rebel to the governing authority of on Callisto. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean
that was a good twist.
yeah.
So what about some of the main
Good.
villains, though? If we're
Yeah.
ready to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did want to say one thing. We mentioned in the Callisto Protocol episode about this episodic podcast that served. I guess it was a prequel to the Callisto Protocol, the Helix Station. It stars Gwendolyn Christie and a few other actors. And at the time, we hadn't listened to it, and we were sort of poking fun because it's not really a spoiler at this point, but we didn't really love that game, and so I actually did wind up going back and listening to the podcast, and it actually was pretty good. It was very well acted. Had a pretty good story. It was sort of like I guess the way it used to be before TVs, where you had to listen to stories on the radio. Now it's podcasts, but it was no visuals, but it was pretty good. I would just as an aside, I would recommend it. There were 6, I think, like maybe 20-minute episodes, so about the length of a movie, maybe.
That's interesting, but it didn't, right? It didn't add any understanding or anything to the story of the game, right?
No. And that's what was good. We talked about sort of a knock on The Evil Within about the story being so hard to decipher in the main game. I wouldn't necessarily say that about the Callisto Protocol or Resident Evil for that matter. I mean, both, and I think I touched on this, both stories were worse, I think, in those 2 games, but much more clearly stated. But, as far as the character, we talked about a couple of the main characters, but let's go into villains and supporting characters.
Yeah. So, we talked about a couple of the supporting characters just now in Callisto Protocol, but really there was 2 main villains
in Callisto Protocol.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Warden Cole, who you don't fight. He's just sort of the part of the brains behind this operation, and I don't know if he was ever meant to be like the main brain behind it. I actually didn't quite get that. Maybe he was. But then there was also Captain Ferris, who is sort of like his enforcer, and implied that he is sort of the prototype of how this virus or whatever, plague or whatever they let out to sort of evolve humans to be able to live on other planets and to be stronger and all of that. He's sort of the prototype for it. So he winds up becoming the main villain. He's somewhat of a stale character. I feel he's just sort of like
that's what I was gonna say. I didn't really feel a whole great deal for those 2 characters.
Yeah, especially Ferris was pretty. He just wasn't a very deep character. He was just kind of like this, like you said. He was the test subject guy who got turned into the big monster at the end, but he wasn't a very deep character.
Yeah. So like,
and then I was just gonna mention.
Yeah, go ahead.
2 had, the main boss that you fight 4 times.
But there was literally nothing to him. He's just
exactly
sort of like a good-looking villain, I guess. But there was no reason as to why he was that way.
Yeah, right. Exactly, which is lame.
Whereas, let's shift over to Resident Evil now. You have your zombies and you have your lickers, which are a cool enemy, and you have those big annoying blobs in the sewers that poison you. But I mean, you have some really iconic, cool main boss enemies, as far as William Birkin, who more so than a boss really is critical to the story as far as the creator of the G virus for Umbrella, and then Umbrella Corporation tries to steal it from him, and he winds up they basically shoot him dead, but he's able to inject himself to survive. But then he turns into this hideous monster, and then that his wife Annette is part of the story, who's another scientist, and then his daughter Sherry, who you wind up helping in Claire's storyline. Those are all sort of iconic characters of the game, and then of course Mr. X, which we've hit on a number of points, and Tom had talked about sort of like his backstory, which very unfortunately and regrettably is not showcased in the remake.
Yeah, that was unfortunate, but yeah. So I mean, just getting back to it, the bosses in Resident Evil or the antagonist characters, I felt had a lot more depth. Where it wasn't just some experiment.
Gone
Like
awry.
Birkin. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's more what the whole game is about.
Well, yeah, but like a zombie is, yeah, I don't know. Like,
No, I wouldn't call that an attack. It's like we're not really talking about monsters
no,
at this point. It's more
right,
just
right,
like
right.
the characters. But
And
yeah,
then,
like Birkin, he had this choice to either die or become this monster, and he chose to do that.
Yeah,
to inject himself. So I mean, there's
yeah, because he was obsessed with the G virus anyway, so he
Yeah.
like didn't really see it as a bad thing either, and I think that sort of lent to it. And we didn't really talk about, so we've kind of left the evil within out as far as other than talking about Sebastian, the main protagonist so far. We haven't talked about either the supporting characters there or the villains. And there's a couple of good supporting characters in that game too. I mean, you have his partner, Joseph Oda.
Joseph.
Yeah.
I think Julie Kidman was a good character too, but you didn't really find that out until you played the DLC.
Right. So that's all part of Joseph Oda's his partner, and then Julie Kidman was supposedly the rookie, but you find out she was this plant from this other company, and she has her own sort of agenda throughout all of this. So it's that was good. That was interesting, I felt. And then the villains. Yeah, go ahead.
That's what I was going to say. I also like how they went into Ruvik's backstory and his whole family, and like with Laura and his parents and how he killed them and stuff. Like, I think it was cool how you don't really witness that as it happens, but you get all that information as you play through the story.
Yeah.
Oh, spoiler alert, by the way.
Yeah. Through flashbacks and stuff. Yeah. Those are really interesting characters. I mean, Ruvik is a great villain who's, psychotic, but is some reason to what he's doing. And, I think that's, he was a great villain. And then you have more minor supporting characters like Dr. Jimenez and Leslie Withers, who are very important to the progression of the story, especially Leslie, as sort of this guy who can survive this system and not turn into a zombie like creature or a monster like so many other people, but who is sort of mentally unstable himself, and who Ruvik's trying to use to escape into a body. So it's hard. I mean, there's great characters in these games.
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, I love the design of many of the villains in Evil Within.
Right. And those designs are supposed to be like versions of people that got pulled into the system, or their consciousnesses or personalities, like the sadist is supposed to be like a serial murderer or something like that. So it's like, and then it got projected into this sort of physical manifestation of that.
Yeah, and that concept is pretty cool to me.
Yeah. So, all right, you want to rank this category?
All right. So stories and characters.
Mm-hmm.
Surprise, surprise. I'm going to give Evil Within the nod. And then I'm going to do Callisto Protocol and Resident Evil 2 as last.
I think I have to go with that order. As much as and you won't get it from either the Resident Evil episode or this episode, but I really love Resident Evil. It's one of my favorite franchises of all time. But when you're breaking them down, I have to agree. I just think the Evil Within's the best story, even though it was hard to understand. And Callisto Protocol was somewhat cliche, but tried to change it up a little bit more so than Resident Evil. And it was easy to understand, and they kind of, paint you a picture. So that's the reason for my order.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the same order, actually, despite my complaints about the Evil Within being impossible to understand while you're playing it. And mainly because of the characters, I think. Yeah, so Resident Evil as a franchise, I think, has a very good story. And I think I mentioned this during the Resident Evil 2 episode that we did. But just this game as a standalone game doesn't really do much in terms of the entire universe, the Resident Evil universe. Yeah, that's why I have that ranked low. And again, like the characters in Resident Evil 2 specifically at this point in their like lives within the universe aren't really like standouts. I think these two characters, like Leon and Claire specifically, become really great when you start getting into like Code Veronica and Resident Evil 4. But yeah, that didn't happen yet. So yeah. And then Callisto Protocol. I did really like Jacob as a character. I thought he was good. Yeah. And story wise, it was a little bit unique. So, and also like you had to kind of progress through to understand some things. But it wasn't so obscure like Evil Within where you just didn't understand anything. So it's kind of like a nice middle ground.
I'm itching to talk about replay value.
Let's get into it, and that'll be our last category before we pick a winner. So these all have DLC. They all have like a couple of DLC. Well, Resident Evil has it actually as part of the. I don't think it's DLC.
It was DLC originally.
Originally, yeah.
But I believe it was free.
Yeah.
But so it didn't launch with the game when it first came out.
There you go. But the other two had paid DLC.
So
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really consider DLC replay value.
Yeah, me either.
Oh no, not this again.
Well,
I guess you're not replaying it per se, so I guess that's true.
No, yeah, I mean you're not. Replay value is the value in replaying the game.
Well, thank you for that explanation. So let's start maybe with like, I don't know, collectibles. So one thing I don't even think we mentioned in the Resident Evil episode was those like Mr. Raccoon toys. Like, I don't think I got one of those. Yeah, I saw a couple. I was like, I don't want to waste a bullet on this thing.
Yeah, I know, it was so weird because like other Resident Evil games, like more the recent ones, like it was clear. Like in Resident Evil 7, there was like those bobblehead thingies you had to shoot or slash or whatever. But like I didn't know what I was looking for with the Resident Evil ones, so I just ignored all of them. To the extent I even saw them. I mean, like,
well, they looked like almost like bobbleheads, right? They were like little toys. They were colorful.
Yeah,
like kind of did stand out.
Raccoon statues.
Yeah. I don't think I actually saw one of them. You get like the flyer that's. I remember seeing the flyer that says like
yeah
that clues you into that, but I don't think I recall seeing one of those statues throughout the game.
Yeah, so I had no motivation on that.
Nah, I mean that's just like you could check the records in, I guess like on the main menu. They have like you killed 100 enemies with the handgun, and then it'll give you like a concept art or something. Yeah, so like I mean, doing that, killing all those raccoon not killing, but destroying all those raccoon statues would unlock one of those things.
Yeah, right.
And it was a trophy and achievement too, I think, if you're a trophy hunter.
Yeah. What if we're not including DLC? I will say the Evil Within, because it was such a tough game, because it gave you your time and your deaths at the end of the game. I think there's some replay value in that, and as far as trying to better those scores. And I guess you could argue that Resident Evil has that too with the ranking system.
Yeah.
So I mean, those two are similar, and I've played those two games multiple times, and I've had fun, with them. Callisto Protocol, I don't really have too much of an interest. We did touch upon the story in one of the DLCs that seemed to pretty much close out Jacob's story, so that's cool. But again, if you guys are saying that I can't include DLC as replay value, then that's a bit of a, I guess, non-relevant comment I just made.
Like all your other comments.
Yeah.
No. What was there any aspect of the main Callisto Protocol game that collectibles or are those like audio logs or something?
Yeah, there were the audio logs. I think that might have been part of like a collectible thing for that. And then I don't think you could really get through the, maybe like if you want to upgrade your weaponry, you might have to play a second time. Maybe it carries over. Sorry, listeners, I don't know exactly.
Yeah, I think that's the case.
Yeah. So I mean, there's
But-
some replay value in that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there was like a new game plus. I think so. I'm not sure, but I think there was a new game plus, which would carry over your.
Is playing on like a harder difficulty like really replay value?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I mean, come on, that's playing the game again. I mean, you gotta.
If a game is fun, you might want to play it again. If the game stinks, you're not going to want to play it again.
Well, that goes to replay value, but
okay.
I think
No, it
Evil
doesn't.
Within. Evil Within has like other levels, like culminating in what's called the Akuma difficulty, which is essentially any enemy kills you in one shot. So like that game is hard enough as it is. I would very likely never want to do that because I think it'd just be too frustrating, and I honestly don't know if I'm good enough to get through it. But that's replay value for people that want YouTube clicks, because I'm sure that gets some notoriety on the internet. Resident Evil has their higher tiered level difficulty as well.
Do you consider the B scenario and replaying as the A scenario as another character replay value?
I do, because it was pretty much exactly the same.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. No. So I mean, that's sort of a point in favor of Resident Evil, because you could play Claire A, Leon B, or
it's
Leon
the only game that
A.
really has any replay value when you
Yeah.
look at the actual definition of replay value.
Yeah.
Wanting to
maybe
collect.
it's a point in favor, but I was really disappointed with the B scenario, how similar it was to the A scenario. So much so that I stopped, midway through. It just felt redundant. It didn't
But
feel
I think
and it was a little harder.
Tom's talking about like doing the characters in reverse, though. Because you are going to hit.
I didn't.
Yeah,
I
you're
didn't
gonna
do that. I didn't
Yeah.
play both A scenarios, but
you're gonna
I imagine those are also very similar.
Yeah, they are, but you are gonna hit a couple of different things at different times. So, I don't think Resident Evil 2 did a good job of really distinguishing between the two. I
It could be better.
Yeah, I played a little bit of the original Resident Evil 2 after the remake. Even that wasn't as good as I remembered, as far as, making them sort of meld together as opposed to being very similar. But I think it did a better job than the remake did. So
Yeah. I don't have a strong opinion, but I'd probably give this category to Resident Evil.
Yeah,
Because of that.
I think that makes the most sense. And I would give Evil Within second.
Yeah, definitely Resident Evil first for me.
Evil Within did have like those map pieces. I don't know how much I don't think that really created more story element, but I think it did give you a collectible or a weapon.
I think an unlock. Yeah, a weapon for the next time kind of thing.
So,
all right.
Yeah, that's that. All right. So I think it's pretty clear Evil Within is the winner of this Brodown, which I'm very excited about. They won almost every category, and that's a big job, taking down a powerhouse survival horror franchise like Resident Evil.
Well, I don't. Are we being too rushed? Are we rushing the
Being a little hasty.
declaration of the winner?
I think somebody wants Evil Within to win.
No, but I mean, they won almost every category.
All right. Well, okay. So I'll give my ranking. Callisto Protocol is absolutely.
What did you say?
Callisto Protocol is
edit that out.
Okay.
Go ahead. Come on, go.
Callisto Protocol is absolutely 100% last place. I really don't think anyone should be wasting their hard-earned money and valuable time on that game. And number 2 is Resident Evil. So number 1 is Resident Evil. Tom, what do you say?
I say Callisto Protocol is last. It did get better towards the end of the game slightly, but yeah, I wouldn't waste any time playing this one. This is hard. I think I'm gonna put Resident Evil 2 second. I don't know. I feel like the game being so easy really just was a turn off for me. So it made the game a lot less fun. even though I liked a lot of the other stuff about it. And that would leave Evil Within number one. It was, really a great game. Did a lot of great. I had my issues with the story and some of the gameplay where it was a little bit linear, but overall, really great game.
And I won't repeat what I said and was told to retract before these two guys spoke and just basically agreed with me. So that's my order too. So
now that we did our due diligence, the listeners could be confident that the decision is the right one.
We did our due diligence throughout this whole episode, but anyway, I'm the same.
You can't just assume that because we liked the audio in Evil Within that it was the best game.
Just because we like every aspect of the game better than the other games doesn't mean we like the entirety of the game better.
How could you assume that?
So anyway, this Brodown is a bit unique where we all pick the same order. So Evil Within is the winner. Congratulations on taking down the powerhouse Resident Evil and Callisto Protocol. All right, everyone. Another Brodown down. Thanks for listening. You can catch us next episode in 2 weeks. Come visit our Instagram and X sites at Bros Boss Battles. That's BROS Boss Battles. And that's right, I said sites for Instagram and X. You can visit our actual website at brothersandbossbattles.com. Check out our podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
That was the second boomer comment you made today.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. Until next time. Thanks for listening.